This is Erin Cloud and Anna Clark with Psychology Department Podcast. Today we are here with Dr. Jessica Bernard, a Cognition and Cognitive Neuroscience professor here at A&M. Dr. Bernard, you're new this semester. How are you adjusting to A&M so far?
I'm liking it. It's obviously been a big adjustment. I've never been to Texas until I came down here for an interview, so it's very new. I'm getting used to the weather. That's been, I think, the biggest thing for me. I grew up in the Northeast, and then I moved to Michigan and then Colorado, where it gets very, very cold. So the fact that it hasn't been cold yet is a little strange. I don't even know what time of year it is in some ways. The fact that it's almost Thanksgiving feels weird because I'm still not needing a big coat or anything. But it's also nice. I can sit outside in the evenings and enjoy it. So it's good. It'll be nice not having to shovel snow off my car.
That is a plus.
Yeah.
So what brought you to A&M?
The job here in the department, actually. So I was looking for jobs and got an offer here and was really happy to accept it and come on down.
Why cognitive psychology and neuroscience?
Yeah, so I've always been really fascinated with how we think and how we do things and also how the brain works. So with cognition and cognitive neuroscience, you get at both of that. So I do a lot of work studying brain mechanisms and brain changes that happen or are related to aging and disease, and this also provides a lot of insight into the behaviors and the way different individuals think because of these differences that are at the neural level. So it lets you look at a lot of these things, and it's really cool to kind of try to look inside what's going on up there in your head, even if it's indirect.
So what classes do you teach and will teach in the spring?
So I haven't started teaching yet, but in the spring I'm going to be teaching a graduate course called the Psychology and Neuroscience of Motor Control. So how do we control our movements, how do we control our bodies, what psychological processes are involved, and what brain systems are involved. And then next fall of 2016, I'll be teaching a larger undergraduate course, the Psychology of Aging. And we'll talk about all of the aspects that happen during adulthood, essentially, from middle age into aging, brain and behavioral changes, but also how things like social factors and social circles come into play and how those aspects influence aging and the processes that go on.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your research has influenced your teaching and what ways you've been able to bring the insights of your research to the courses you teach at the undergraduate level?
Yeah, so I'm really excited actually to teach this class in the fall because a lot of the research I do focuses on aging, so it's something that's near and dear to my heart and my interests. And when I think about teaching, I think it's really important to consider psychology as a science. So in teaching to undergrads, I think it's very helpful to be able to show you all how we come up with this information that we're, lecturing to you about. Like, oh, so-and-so showed this, this, and this. Well, how does that happen? And what does that mean? What goes on? And I'm able to, at times, take my own research and really get into detail about how do we get to this conclusion and what can this research actually tell us about what it's like as a person? Because it's oftentimes very removed. What we do in the lab can be a lot different than how things go on in everyday life. So I think it's really important to try to incorporate it, and I try to do it as best as possible with my own work. You'll also, undergrads will likely hear me talking about work that my friends have done, or colleagues, or mentors, because I think it's fun. It livens things up, and it shows you all the science behind it and where our conclusions and lectures are coming from.
So how do you involve graduate and undergraduate students in your research?
In many ways. So I will hopefully have graduate students that will start working with me in the fall, and I'm also in the process of recruiting undergrads for spring, and I have them involved in many ways. So oftentimes running subjects, so running older and younger adults through a bunch of tasks. They're essentially involved in whatever they want, to whatever level they're willing to commit. So if you want to run a project, if you're willing to spend some time in the lab learning how to do things, I'm more than happy to let someone work more independently. But I try to make them involved at every level as best as I can based on experience and abilities. But if people are willing to put in the time and spend some time, a couple of semesters, you can be pretty independent, even at the undergrad level, in terms of what you're doing and what you're looking at.
What is your philosophy of teaching?
So, philosophy is hard to put it. I guess my general approach to teaching is to try to develop more broader critical thinking skills in thinking about psychology in a scientific way. So I love, in theory, the idea of having more open-ended questions on exams and getting students to link different ideas, because in an ideal world, you'll be able to take one concept and just kind of apply it more broadly and more generally. I want students to start thinking more deeply about things, going a little bit beyond just memorizing the key facts and the key things that might show up on a multiple choice exam. And I like things to be as interactive as possible. It's more fun if you can have a conversation. And whenever I teach, even as a TA when I was in grad school, I tried as best as possible to get everyone feeling comfortable with speaking up in class, even if it's a bigger class, or if it's not as comfortable for people, just to have that more open environment, because that's one way you can learn a lot, by asking questions or by talking through things. And I think it's really important to do that, or try as best as you can, even in a bigger lecture.
So can you tell us about your teaching experiences you've had?
So most of my experience, and by most I mean all, has been as a TA at the University of Michigan when I was a grad student. So I was a TA for Introduction to Cognitive Psychology. I did it for Human Neuropsychology, which was like a neuroscience type class, and then also for Developmental Psychology. So I did a lot where I'd be running the discussion section. So I don't know how it's structured here exactly, but you'd have a big lecture, and then you would go to a discussion section after to talk about topics a little more in depth, review material, etc. So I would run all of those sections for each of those classes. And I also did do a couple of lectures for developmental psych and for other classes that I wasn't a formal TA for.
If you could teach any course you wanted, what would it be and why?
That's a really good question. In many ways, the course I'm teaching for graduate students right now would be it, the Psychology and Neuroscience of Motor Control. But I would also love to do that at the undergrad level. So that was one of the types of classes I took when I was an undergrad that made me want to go into and do research on the things that I look at. So I look at aging and motor behaviors and whatnot and how these things change. So I would love to be able to do it with undergrads. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to be able to have an experimental component, like a lab essentially, where you come in and do a bunch of these different motor tasks that we use, some of the different techniques, things like non-invasive brain stimulation. So you see how we really look at these things, have it be a very hands-on type of course.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Bernard, and we will be back soon with another interesting insight into the faculty of the psychology department.